On this Thursday night, multiplying Omicron infections lead to new travel measures. What it means for people flying to the U.S. and Canadians driving across the border.
We're going to fight this variant with science and speed.
And if you've already booked a trip, what about insurance and refunds? The aftermath of 3 atmospheric rivers in BC, the destruction now and reconstruction ahead.
A lot of crews going around stripping out people's houses.
And calls for royal recognition. The push to honor the pandemic's frontline workers with a royal medal.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There are more changes coming to entry requirements for those traveling to the United States. International travelers, regardless of nationality or vaccination status, will need to get a negative test 1 day before departure rather than 3 days before. Canada has just exempted U.S. visitors from stringent new rules, which require all other foreign air travelers to get tested upon arrival in Canada and self-isolate while awaiting those results. Heading into a busy travel season, it's leading to a lot of confusion. Clarity on the rules, plus finding and paying for COVID tests, are among the obstacles travelers face. At the same time, the Omicron variant is spreading fast in South Africa. It's now the dominant strain there. We'll get to that in just a moment. But we begin with Mike Armstrong in Washington and President Biden's strategy to deal with the new variant.
President Biden is hoping to strike a balance. The new pandemic strategy is meant to fight a potential winter surge and slow down the new Omicron variant, but in a way that doesn't hurt the economy.
It doesn't include shutdowns or lockdowns, but widespread vaccinations and boosters and testing and a lot more.
Now, in terms of new travel restrictions, the new rules don't go as far as some predicted earlier in the week. There is no quarantine for travelers arriving in the U.S., something that was criticized widely by conservative commentators. It may have been a trial balloon, it may have just been fabricated. Instead, the U.S. will require a negative test for anyone 2 years old and up arriving in the country by air. The U.S. has in the past required a negative test within 72 hours. Due to the Omicron variant, that timeline's being cut down considerably.
All inbound international travelers must test within 1 day of departure, regardless of their vaccination status or nationality.
The Biden administration also wants to make getting vaccinated easier, more accessible. Hundreds of new family vaccination clinics will be set up. At-home testing is another front in the fight. The U.S. is going to make it mandatory for health insurers to cover at-home test kits, and for the uninsured, they're going to make free kits available, 50 million of them.
The bottom line, this winter, you'll be able to test for free in the comfort of your home and have some peace of mind.
The U.S. will also start a publicity campaign to push more people to get boosters and first and second shots. But it's that initial dose for people who are resisting that would make the biggest difference. Instead, the country's had to fight a public health emergency with a weapon that's being politicized.
We have people that are very eager to get boosters and are demanding boosters on one hand, and we have people who don't want even first doses on the other hand. So it's something that's made it much more difficult.
There are about 60 million Americans who haven't gotten a first dose. Biden said today there's polling that shows about 30% of people who refuse to get vaccinated now say the Omicron variant has changed their point of view. Biden says that's good news. That said, it does still leave a lot of people. Donna?
All right, Mike Armstrong in Washington tonight. Thanks. The Omicron variant is also spreading in Canada. The Greater Toronto Area confirmed its first case today, a close contact of a traveler who recently returned from a country in southern Africa. 3 other provinces, Quebec, Alberta, and BC, have also reported cases of the Omicron variant. The Delta variant is still dominant here, so what all the experts are watching is whether Omicron will overtake it and what that might mean. Eric Sorensen reports.
Third dose booster shots are beginning to ramp up across the country. In Ontario, those aged 50 and over can get their boosters starting December 13th. That will bring the number eligible for third doses to more than 5 million.
We want to be able to provide the third doses in a timely fashion before the immunity fades, especially as we're seeing an increase in cases related to Delta and the potential threat of Omicron to our communities as well.
federal guidance is expected to be updated soon, several provinces are adhering to the National Advisory Committee's October recommendations to offer boosters to anyone 70 or older, along with vulnerable groups. Saskatchewan and New Brunswick offer to 65 plus. Others are now jumping well ahead. Ontario at 50 and over by mid-December, and Alberta will join Manitoba with boosters for anyone over 18 beginning on Monday.
Given the fact that increased transmission risk in the winter months is lining up with some waning vaccine effectiveness against infection over time, the current evidence supports expanding booster doses to add an additional layer of protection.
Quebec is not ready to offer third doses to people under 70. The Premier says he's sticking with current public health guidelines.
If they change their mind, I'll change the way we proceed. But right now we say it's necessary only for people over 70 years old.
What public health officials don't know yet is whether current vaccines can hold off the Omicron variant.
Where Omicron fits into this is yet to be determined.
Infectious disease specialists expect some protection, but the real reason for boosters now is to protect against Delta, which accounts for the vast majority of COVID cases in Canada and will continue to be dominant for weeks to come.
We know that antibodies wane over time, and by boosting people's immune responses to get those antibody levels back up is another measure to keep people safe from developing severe infection.
Back in Ontario, they're vaccinating children along with offering flu vaccines. And the Chief Medical Officer of Health says there's also time for Canadians to get COVID boosters before winter and the Omicron variant arrive in full force. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
In South Africa, Omicron has now become dominant, and it is driving a sharp rise in infections there. Cases have nearly doubled in 24 hours. There is still not enough robust data from patients to reach any conclusions about how transmissible it is, how capable it is of evading vaccines, and how sick people get. What is clear, though, is that South Africa is in the midst of a fourth wave. Crystal Goomansingh has the latest.
It appears that what the world watched happen with Delta is now happening with Omicron. It's certainly happening in South Africa, where the new variant identified a week ago is now responsible for the majority of infections. South African scientists are working to test and sequence their way to concrete answers about the variant's transmissibility.
In South Africa, where WHO has already a team working in genomic sequencing, we are deploying a surge team in Gauteng province to support surveillance and contact tracing.
Over the past few days, confirmed infections in South Africa have exploded. 70% of the virus genomes it sequenced last month have been the new variant.
We are worried about the rapid rise in these numbers, and we want to deal with it as if we are in the fourth wave.
And officials are also seeing more cases of people being reinfected with the virus.
Lord have mercy.
Vaccination campaigns are underway, but those will take time. South Africa is home to 60 million people, only a quarter of whom are fully vaccinated. And where previous infections offered some protection against Delta, experts here say with Omicron, that doesn't appear to be the case. The president of South Africa is angry about the global response and the rush on international travel restrictions.
We stand firmly against any form of health apartheid in the fight against this pandemic.
Travel bans, he says, are unfair and unscientific.
Given that it was our own scientists who first detected the Omicron variant, it is also a slap in the face of African excellence and expertise.
Those experts are now trying to figure out how long this strain may have been circulating and how deadly it might be. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Germany reported 73,000 new COVID cases today and is imposing tight restrictions on the unvaccinated. Those who have not had the shot can visit essential businesses like pharmacies and grocery stores, but are otherwise barred from public life. Outgoing Chancellor Angela Merkel calls it an act of national solidarity to help ease the burden on hospitals, which are filling up. Germany is also requiring masks in schools and limiting the number of people at large events. Merkel says vaccinations could be mandatory by February. About 68% of Germans are vaccinated. Turning now to southern BC, the sun made an appearance today and the worst of the storms have passed, but the threat of mudslides remains. A number of highways are closed, fuel restrictions are in effect, and emergency orders are still in place. In Abbotsford and the Sumas Prairie, cleanup and repairs are underway, and tonight we're getting our first clear sense of the devastation on farms. The province says 819 farms are under evacuation. 628,000 poultry have died, as well as 420 dairy cattle, about 12,000 hogs, and 110 beehives are submerged. Mike Drolet has been talking to people about what they face in the days and weeks ahead.
At first glance, the inside of Ian Mina's house looks like a new build. But the floors, insulation, and drywall it needs are all things destroyed by the floods that Minan has torn out over the past few days.
A lot of crews going around stripping out people's houses, getting it out before it all starts to mold.
This house was his oasis, where he could sit and enjoy the peace of the summer breeze in the shadow of Vedder Mountain. Now he's looking at a painful reconstruction that could run over $150,000. 80% of which should be covered by the province's disaster fund.
No insurance. You can't get flood insurance here because we're in a flood zone.
It could take weeks for the floodwaters to drain out of the 9 square kilometers of Sumas Prairie. 2 feet of rain, or 0.6 meters, was just too much for the land to absorb. But at least now the worst of the storms has passed, allowing workers to take down the Tiger Dam that had blocked off Highway 1. Getting back to normal is going to take some time. 2 elementary schools have been closed indefinitely until they can be cleaned up and cleared of any mold issues. Until then, students will have to learn remotely or bus to a temporary classroom elsewhere. There's just so much that's still unknown. We found Terry Woodland and his wife Connie near the trailer they bought in May.
I think it was about around this area here somewhere.
They managed to save most of their belongings. Everything else is a question mark.
Are you going to be able to live in the trailer?
I'm not sure yet. Got to check into that.
Insurance?
Question mark as well.
The only certainty is their uncertainty about returning to this small corner of the Fraser Valley they saw as idyllic. In reality, it's a floodplain. The option to move closer to Connie's native Arizona, they say, is appealing for obvious reasons.
And look, it's starting to rain.
I know, go away.
After the November people here had, most could just use a break. Mike Drolet, Global News, Abbotsford, BC.
The Omicron variant and your vacation coming up. What to do if you've booked a getaway or are thinking about it. Rideau Hall's internal cyber network has been hit by a breach. The Office of the Secretary to the Governor General confirms there was an unauthorized access. It says the impact is unclear and improvements are being made to strengthen the network. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity is involved in the investigation. Rideau Hall says protecting the personal information of all who work with and interact with the office is a priority. Well, Canadians will get a snapshot of the state of the country's finances on December 14th. That's the date the government has set for a fall economic update. It's a hot topic as parties debate legislation to retool pandemic benefits and as Canadians deal with soaring inflation. Abigail Beeman reports.
Of a continuation of the poor excuse of it's just inflation.
Just inflation, the Conservatives' new repeated critical catchphrase as they hammer on inflation in the House of Commons.
There's prices going up across the board.
The finance minister now promising a new look at the state of things.
I'm pleased to announce that I will be giving an economic and fiscal update to Canadians on December 14th.
December 14th, just days before the House rises for the holidays.
They are dragging their feet. You know, it took 2 months to come back here to work in Parliament. We still don't have any committee organized, and they are waiting this last week before the Christmas break.
Trudeau government wants to deliver a big sack of inflationary coal for every family just in time for Christmas.
October saw the highest rate of inflation in nearly 2 decades, 4.7%. And the Conservatives are trying to blame it on Liberal policies, though economists say that's not quite fair. And it's a phenomenon currently experienced across the globe.
There's no silver bullet here to solve this type of inflation driven by global pressures and supply chains.
The best thing that Canadians can do is be patient.
As for what's in the update, major proposed spending measures are already on the table. $7.4 billion in retooled pandemic benefits were announced in October. Bill C-2 was introduced in the House last week, and so far the opposition says they won't support it. The NDP says it doesn't do enough to help people still struggling, and the Conservatives have a number of demands, including getting the Finance Committee back up and running to study it. Lots to work out with just a couple more weeks until the holiday break. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
In Edmonton, members of the Métis Nation are preparing to meet Pope Francis at the Vatican later this month. Métis, First Nations and Inuit delegations will each have an hour to speak privately with the pontiff about the role of the Catholic Church in residential schools.
So to have that acknowledgement is a great gift to us. Yeah. And we have our stories going there. And some of these stories are cemented. They're already done. But there should be new stories coming back. And that's what I'm hoping for, are the new stories.
Leaders and residential school survivors from the Métis Nation will meet with Pope Francis on December 18th. The Pope is planning to visit Canada, but no date has been set. Omicron anxiety, some advice before you pack your bags. It's been a busy few days for Canadian travel agents. The newly discovered Omicron variant and subsequent travel bans and changing restrictions are creating a lot of confusion this holiday season. Anne Gaviola has more on what you need to know about air travel and insurance.
Before news of the Omicron variant broke, Canada's airline industry was set to hit a pandemic-era high this holiday season.
It'll take time to see whether this results in a rash of cancellations. We are hearing, of course, people are saying, like, should I be concerned? Am I at risk of getting stuck overseas if I take a flight now?
Travel insurance quotes on rates.ca are up nearly 300% this fall compared with this time last year. Interest in travel surged, and with the newly discovered variant, interest in insurance has spiked too. The good news is more than half of travel insurance providers across Canada now provide options to protect yourself in the event of a COVID-related medical emergency or trip disruption. In the case of travel cancellation insurance, what's covered and what isn't depends on a variety of factors. And there is insurance that will cover you regardless of the circumstances, but you'll pay extra for that. More commonly, there's insurance that will reimburse what you've paid, whether that's a deposit for a flight or hotel or prepaid the full amount, in the event of a cancellation with some exceptions. You have to read the fine print. And keep an eye on government advisories and warnings, which can change quickly. Being in a part of the world that federal authorities suddenly deem unsafe can render your insurance null and void. When it comes to flying, if the airline cancels your flight for reasons within its control, you're owed a full refund, not a voucher. But Omicron is beyond the carrier's control. Evolving bans and restrictions can cancel your trip or stop you from making a connecting flight, and you may be on the hook for that. This consumer advocate says if you cancel because you're worried about what could happen while you're abroad, you have to rely on insurance if your ticket doesn't offer flexibility.
If you decide to cancel out of your subjective, possibly even very reasonable concerns, then it is a matter for your insurance and the terms and conditions that were set out in the airline's tariff and possibly other terms and conditions attached to the ticket.
Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Next, the push to give Canada's frontline workers royal recognition.
You're watching Global National.
When Queen Elizabeth marked 60 years on the throne in 2012, the Canadian government seized the moment to honour its own citizens. The Diamond Jubilee Medal was created and has been awarded to Canadians from all walks of life for their service to community and country. Well, as the Queen approaches her 70th year on the throne, there are calls to honour frontline workers who have given so much in the pandemic. But as David Aiken explains, there are no plans for more medals.
During the 2012 Jubilee, special medals were given to thousands of deserving Canadians, RCMP members, the military, volunteers, Indigenous leaders. Prince Charles himself toured the country to hand some out, as did then Prime Minister Stephen Harper.
Thank you very much.
Olympic gold medalist Adam Van Couverden, now an MP himself, also received a Diamond Jubilee Medal for his accomplishments in sport.
The athletes were all brought up to the House of Commons to go onto the carpet and meet a whole bunch of MPs, and it was a very special moment for a lot of us.
But there may be no such special moments for deserving Canadians next year, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee year. The Royal Canadian Legion, among others, has been pushing the Trudeau government for 2 years to commit to a medal program, but so far, its requests have been ignored.
Are we going to lose something by not having a Diamond Jubilee medal? We'll live, but we'll live more poorly because of it.
Quebec MP Pierre Paulus even made a direct appeal, writing a letter to the Queen.
You know, with the pandemic, we have a lot of stories of people being involved and to help Canadians, and I don't understand why Justin Trudeau and his government don't want that medals.
Another MP, Cheryl Gallant, put a petition before the House of Commons with more than 1,800 signatures asking for a Jubilee Medal program.
We're so blessed to have the Queen with us after 70 years of her service.
But with less than a month until the new year, the government is undecided.
Well, we're looking at the different options at this moment to see what's better to celebrate the event, so we'll have more information later.
The medal program in 2012 did cost $8 million, and attitudes about Canada's connection to the monarchy, particularly among Quebecers and Indigenous peoples, have changed.
I know there's a lot of conversations around the monarchy and the relevance in 2021, but if it's an opportunity to thank frontline workers, healthcare workers, and volunteers over the last 2 years that we've had, I think it's worth it.
The only thing the federal government has committed to so far, a grant program. Service clubs, local legions, and so on can apply for up to $5,000 to produce events to celebrate Elizabeth's 70th year on the throne. Donna?
70 years. David Aiken in Ottawa, thanks. And that's Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Tofino, BC. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Colleen Christie will be at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I'll see you on Saturday for the new reality. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.